still very much so function in silos there. The thing about coming to Rhode Island that I see is that, particularly with the demographic shifts happening in this country, is that I see you all really reflect more so where the country is headed, particularly with the emphasis on ELL students, with the Latino population here. And so that's been a big shift for me as well. What's similar, again, is that heightened level of segregation that I do see here, and I do feel and I do experience it here. I live in the city of Providence, and I venture out to the surrounding areas on the weekends and whatnot. And as a new person, it's interesting. I get the new narratives, the narratives about different communities or different schools or different districts and whatnot. And I do see that kind of recreating some of that narrative is part of my work as being here as a new dean. I think there are similar challenges here, though, and in some ways Providence is unique, but in other ways it's not necessarily an anomaly in urban education. But I think you all have you're right on the cusp of something big happening, and that largeness was posed, I think, in one of those questions there that you posed about the direction of the state takeover here.
So big good or big bad, Dean?
Big unknown as of now. I think for Providence, and here again coming in as an outsider, you all have the ability to come together and to engage in collective impact. And going from table to table, I'm at foundation tables, I'm down at Rhode, I'm in schools, I'm all across the community in different settings at different meetings. And the one thing that I think is missing as we talk about what's going on in the Providence schools and schools in general in Rhode Island is this idea of collective impact. That means a shared discourse around a shared problem. That means that all the stakeholders are gathering around the table and we have shared forms of data to inform what types of decision making we're going to do. What is our next path? What type of action are we going to take? And I think as an outsider, I think the fate of Providence schools is really going to rely upon those next steps around collective impact, how people rally around these schools and these communities, because the fate of the Providence schools is the fate of Rhode Island. The fate of one is the fate of all.
Thank you, Dean. You know, it's interesting. I have to note, it's interesting that in our last Publick Occurrences, which was a totally different topic about climate change, we had a panelist from Miami, and she also opened with that this is a very segregated place. I'm just connecting the dots on these public occurrences and people coming from the outside and first impressions. Very interesting. So that first panel really was designed to talk about what are the best ways to deliver education without getting totally in the weeds here, and give us that landscape. And you'll notice that Commissioner Infante Green, her seat is empty. That's intentional. She had a conflict and she will be here, so we'll expect her at any time. So I just want to tell you that, and we'll get back to her when she shows up. I want to switch over to this middle panel. And this middle panel is really about this state takeover conversation. And you'll see on the panel, I'll start with Superintendent Gallo, who's got a little bit of experience in this. She's the interim superintendent in Providence right now during this period, but she was also the superintendent of Central Falls. You may know her from there. And I'm just wondering, as a starting point, Dr. Gallo, how can this state takeover be leveraged for success in a way in which that sort of original city-driven model wouldn't work? Or is that even a fair question?
I think anything's a fair question at this point. I believe that the takeover currently is very different in that there's a determination there was collaboration among the city council, the mayor, the powers that be, to say, well, okay, if we haven't done it, you take it. So it's been handed over.
Yeah.
What remains to be seen is there enough grit, enough absolute resource of will to get this job done? It could have been done before. It should have been done before. And if we keep children first, family is right there, right beside them, and then the respect and integrity as a circle with all the teachers, with all the general public, and an absolute transparent behavior, communicating everything openly and widely, will see success.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Gallo. Mayor Diosa is on the panel, and he's in Central Falls. You may know him, youngest mayor in the state of Rhode Island. At one point, does that still hold true? You're getting older. You were showing me gray hairs backstage. I saw them. Well, I'm just, being in the situation you're in, the state did take over, probably in a different way, but did take over Central Falls in 1992, long before you were mayor. But being the mayor within that city, what is that like when a state is operating the budget and you're the mayor? How does Central Falls function differently than maybe other places?
Yeah, so understanding that in 1992 I was just entering the second grade,
Nice, rub it in, rub it in. Yeah.
So speaking to Gary Sass, who negotiated this transition to have the state take over, the idea then was, the city could not afford the 10% that it needed to contribute to the school formula in order to make it whole. The arrangement was, we'll take over the schools as a state, but we want to make this district district of innovation. And for the next 30 years, I think we all have enough information out there to get perspective of where that's going. As a mayor for now going on to my 8th year, I fundamentally believe that education is everything for any municipality. If you want lower crime rates, higher home ownership rates, better investments, education is the biggest thing. And so understanding the dynamic of what I entered, where there were other administrations previous to me that were disengaged and sort of looked at the school district as the problem of the state, I tried my best to partner up with Dr. Gallo and work on projects and be a partner as a municipal leader to understand that, although I don't have authority over the choice of the school members, or the school board members, I should say, or the superintendent, these are the kids that I see every single day when I go home. And so I try to partner up as much as I could with Dr. Gallo, with Superintendent Victor Capellan. I worked on outside projects that I think will bear fruits in the next few years, like taking a dilapidated drug house and turning it into a tutoring center with Dr. Gallo. And so from the outside in, as much as I could influence, I tried my best doing it. But it's different. Again, the engagement of the state wasn't out of urgency as it is, I believe, today in Providence. So I can highlight so many factors, lack of political will in Central Falls at the time from the elected officials, to just punting the problem of the school district to the state. That's led to where we are today. But I think there's been a lot of progress made in Central Falls. And again, it's tough to compare just because of the circumstances being very different. But
Yeah, do you think it's a good idea to do more of this rather than less of this across the state? Should the state get involved with many more school districts, take over, things of that nature, you think?
So looking at it from my square mile in Central Falls and seeing all the adults in the room having important conversations about the future of Providence is pretty inspiring. So I think everyone's looking towards Providence right now, being the capital city, and with everyone, looks like from my end that they're all into making the schools better for the kids. You know, I go back to one point that I seriously tell myself all the time. You know, I was lucky, you know, I was a product of the Central Falls School District. But again, some of these kids only get one shot at education. And so if we don't take this serious and we don't try anything possible, you know, shame on us, pretty much.
Thank you, Mayor. Mary Beth Calabro is the president of the Providence Teachers Union, and I guess when I hear about this takeover, I'm wondering, my understanding is that the mayor of the school committee doesn't have the type of authority over the school district as they would normally, and I'm wondering if you're concerned about the loss of democratic oversight in that picture, given from where you're looking.
No, I'm not concerned about it. I've started from when Dr. Gallo was made interim. She made it a point to have a conversation with me about a relationship that we were going to have and how we would move forward in a collegial way, in a collaborative way. So I'm hoping that we will be able to build upon that with whatever superintendent is named, whenever that superintendent is named. I have had a collaborative relationship with previous superintendents as well, so I'm not concerned about the democracy of the district. I'm concerned about when are we going to get started and, you know, how quickly can we get things done. That's my concern. My concern is, you know, the expediency. My concern is how fast can we get our information and our products and these changes to effectuate our kids in the immediacy.
Yeah, and is that the interest on speed simply because, look, we got to get moving and get better quicker? Or is there other reasons? Yeah.
No, that's the reason. Yeah. Our kids are our focus, and you know, we have another set of tests coming up, and not that tests are the end-all and be-all, but if that's the measure by which we're being held, which it is, obviously, because that's all anyone keeps talking about, then we need to do better, and we need to focus on getting more for our kids, and we need to focus on, if we're getting a new curriculum, then let's get the new curriculum, and let's get the professional development that our teachers need to instruct our students in the new curriculum. You know, no disrespect to the people that are here. These forums are great, but I'm tired of talking. Let's get to work.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a good segue because most of us in here are of a certain age. I won't point out one or over the other. But we have a student on the panel tonight, and she's not your average student, really, but we're still going to hear what she has to say. She's quite above average, it seems to me. Jaychelle Schenk is the co-chair of the Development Committee of the Board of Directors for Young Voices. So it's quite the leadership role she has. And my question to you, Jaychelle, is as a 10th grade student at the Met, but perhaps more importantly, as a board member at Young Voices, the youngest ever, right? You're the youngest ever on that board, right? You're not now, maybe, but you were. Yeah. What are you experiencing yourself, and what are you witnessing with your peers in relationship to education and that experience?
So I would say that the most important piece that we're missing currently.
Yep, it's coming. There you go.
Can you hear me? Is that better? I would say the most important piece that we're missing currently is the restorative practices and restorative justice within our schools. I previously came from a school where I was being severely bullied, and that could easily be solved by restorative practices and restorative justice instead of punitive punishments, because restorative practices and restorative justice are exactly what we need in order to succeed. Because say a student gets suspended for a fight or something like that, they would come back 3 days later, and that same issue and that same food would still be there, and it would just be heightened because that student missed school for 3 days and missed out on an important education, which is incredibly valuable to their future. They're just missing days, and it's causing chronic absenteeism, and it's not helping any of our youth. Because if you have forgotten, the youth are the youth of tomorrow, and we're your future, and you need to invest in us now, because if you don't invest in us, then you will not have a future. We are the youth of tomorrow, and we're also the youth of today. So if you think about it, you need to invest in us. I'm not pitching to you that you should care about us because you already should, but either way, if you're a parent, a teacher, a community member, you have a stake in this. Don't think that you're not a member of this fight because you are, in some sense. You may not be a parent or someone who exactly sees the results of what's happening, but you are still somehow connected to the results of whatever is currently happening with the state. I may not be a Providence Public School student, but I do hear experiences from other Young Voices members, and I know what their experiences are like, and the climate and culture of the schools is horrible. There are students getting sent out to leave because they have headphones walking in the hallway. It's not a reason why you should be taking away from a student's education. It's not a reason why you should be messing up someone's future by giving them multiple days absent and giving that to a college and putting it on a student's transcript when that's their only way out. The youth, to put it lightly, are the people who are going to replace you in the seats that you're sitting in. Your career, your seats currently, wherever you are, we're going to be sitting in those seats one day, and it's up to you now to make sure that we're well prepared to be sitting in those seats and to be doing the job that you're currently doing.
It's a little bit of a good sign that all these people showed up, right? These people seem to care. It's good. It's a good sign. Yanisa Gallant, listen to this bio. Because I was talking to her backstage, and I'm like, holy moly, you have perspective beyond perspective. Born a Cuban refugee at age 5, began your adult career as a bilingual teacher in Providence. In 2012, received the National Milk and Educator Excellence Award. You've also been a principal in East Providence, and now you're the director of multilingual learners in East Providence. What's your take on all this? You've got a lot of different angles and a lot of different viewpoints that a lot of us in this room do not have.
That's a loaded question. What's my take in all of this? So I am a firm believer of what we believe is what we actually see and what we look for. And I am also a firm believer that what we look for is what we find. I have data all in front of me because I'm also a firm believer on making sure that when I speak, it comes from a place of data-driven conversations. I will tell you that I was a student in Providence myself. I was a second language learner myself. I then became a teacher of second language learners. And my perspective comes from a place of simplicity. So what I can share with you is that there's a word that we really all need to focus on when it comes to education, and that word is trust. That is what I see lacking currently in our infrastructures when it comes to decision making. We tend to have a lot of conversations of what should happen, but those conversations are coming from individuals that have not been in the classroom for a very, very long time. So I'd like to point out that I am a proud Providence student, that I received a very rich education. Did I have educators that did not believe? Sure. If you come from a very affluent environment, you will also have educators that did not believe. What I will share is that we have this narrative that if you come from an urban environment, no one cares. And what I can tell you is that I am living proof that one educator changed my life and gave me perspective of what is possible. So my hope is that I can use myself as an example of a refugee, a second language learner, a student that was not great at school. I flunked every standardized test possible. I had to retake my Miller's Analogies test to get into Rhode Island College 3 times. But here's what I will tell you and what I learned from that. Persistence and grit is what allowed for me to continue going. And it wasn't a voice within me, it was those that I surrounded myself with, and those were my educators that said to me, you have a lot in you that you can give. What I'd like to present to you as far as data goes is that I went ahead and I pulled SurveyWorks data. SurveyWorks is perception data that's given to students, teachers, and parents. And what I noticed was I pulled from our lowest performing district in the state and our highest performance district in the state. And what's interesting that you may not be aware of is that we're all the same. So our students believe that they are valued in the same percentage regardless of where they are. Our teachers in our lowest performing schools actually have a higher belief system that students can do the impossible, more so than our higher performing districts. The biggest change that you see in perception data comes from families. And it's not about the education their students are receiving. It is not about the teachers. They actually love the teachers and say they could never do what they do on a daily basis. The biggest change is school safety. And so when we think about parent choice and parents having conversations about what is not good enough, if you really dig deep and start talking to families, my mom said to me, you are going to go to Mount Pleasant High School. My feeder school was Central High School, and at the time there was a lot of violence that was taking place at Central, gang violence. And I won't tell you how old I am, but at the time, that's what was happening. And my mom said to me, you're going to go to Mount Pleasant High School because they actually don't have any fights there. That is how the decision was made. And so if you talk to families that are in fear and families that are scared, it really comes down to the school, climate, and safety perspectives in our buildings. I will tell you, as a school administrator, as a teacher, we are working hard. We are making sure that we do restorative practices because we do believe that there is a school-to-prison pipeline when we send kids home that do not have the exposure necessary to actually problem solve and understand what's happening within their own life. We have trauma in our schools that I could share with you that I would cry myself to sleep hoping that a child would be okay that night. So my take on all of this is we need to trust our educators. We need to make sure that they are part of the conversation and part of policy making and part of the decision makings when we talk about a state takeover or when we talk about what should change in a classroom. Pearson and all of these companies are going to make money off the back of the struggle. We need to understand that that is not the answer. The answer is in our classrooms. The answer are the hard-working teachers that no matter what students score on a standardized test and no matter how many times they need to retake a standardized test so they can go to Rhode Island College, no matter how many times that happens, they never give up on that student. They have a belief system. And may I add that when I took my principalship standardized test, I was 96th percentile on that test because it was something that I loved and I was passionate about. So let's rethink education and let's make sure that we support the people doing the work each and every day. I thank every teacher that's here today. I know you're grading papers after this.
She was a Providence teacher, by the way. We let her get away.
So we have to, I guess we're going to follow that fire up with a guy who's got probably the coolest name in the room, Jesse Von Doom. It's real, it's his real name. I love that name. We didn't want this to just be a conversation about Providence, and to ensure that we invited Jesse. He co-parents in Newport to two young daughters, and he moved here from Berkeley, and we wanted to get his take on what's going well from your vantage point in Newport, what's not going quite as well, and can you compare and contrast? What are you feeling as a parent, Jesse?
I'd start by also just pointing out that, yes, I moved here from Berkeley, technically.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up very far away in a place called Massachusetts, about 17 miles across.
Never heard of it.
Yeah,
Yep.
Don't worry about it. Good baseball. And thank you, by the way. Following you is, come on. I think the thing I've noticed from all of this really is, usually when you're looking for the perspective of a parent, you're expecting someone to talk about, their individual experience with their children. And I'll talk about my daughters all day. I'm proud of both of them. 7th grade and 4th grade, and just awesome.
Mike.
Take my mic.
No. There you go. Is my closer? Oh,
Yeah.
there you go.
There you go.
I'm just bad at these things. The thing I'd like to point out, though, and the thing I keep hearing from all of us, is just how important it is that we do this together, not looking at one individual perspective or the next. And that's true for teachers. I think that's true for administrators. I think that's true for parents, students, and frankly, everyone. You made an amazing point, which is every one of our students they're going to be the people that fill our lives in the future. You might not have kids now, but when you're, into your 80s, into your 90s, who do you think your doctors are? Who do you think our business leaders are? These are the people we have to take care of, and I think we starts in a classroom as a few students turning into a community in that classroom, turning into a school community, turning into a bigger, broader community. Rhode Island can do a lot better for education in all of our cities, not just in Providence. I think Newport is struggling in a lot of ways. We're looking at how to fund a new high school and have no real idea where that's coming from, but it needs to happen now. We're seeing the buildings, the infrastructure, the teachers all struggling right now, and the parents know it. The reason I bring all this up is that I look to the takeover that's going to be happening in Providence, and the big thing there is that it's not just about the state takeover. The state means people in this case. It means our elected officials. It means people that we are trying to entrust with our future, frankly. And that takeover isn't going to be about 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. Like you said, we want to get going. This is a process that's already started. It's going to take us years and, frankly, many different people in those leadership roles to make sure it works. And my biggest hope from it, the thing I'd like to say, is that we all look to Providence. That's how Rhode Island works. When you're the size of a postage stamp, you look to the corner, right? So, cool. I think we can all learn from this, and it won't be a success in Providence unless Providence can really stand as that example that all the other cities can look to see how do we do this and fix it and get it right this time. So that's my perspective as a parent, is I want to see my kids in a system that works for them, but more importantly, I want to see the system work for all of those kids.
Thank you very much, Jesse. So thanks for coming, Commissioner Infante Green's in the house. Glad to have you. Allow the Providence Journal reporters to ask the first question to the commissioner. And I'm coming down your way, so I'm about to get down there with you all. And I want to remind you of a few ground rules in here, which is this is an exercise in civil discourse. So please be respectful of the panelists. Please be respectful of each other. When I come around with a microphone and you'll raise your hand because you'll have a question, that means you have a question. And questions end in question marks. So I will ensure that that's a question, because the rants and so forth, I will take the microphone away from you. And I control the microphone at all times. So just speak into the microphone. I will not let you take it. Trust me. I've done this before. And I just wanted to give you those ground rules. Okay, does that seem fair? Can we live by that? All right, so our first question to the commissioner is coming from the Providence Journal, and I believe Madeline's going to ask it.
Hi, Commissioner.
How are you?
Good, how are you? All right. Our first question is, when will the state take credit or blame for what happens with the state takeover?
So, first, I want to start by apologizing for being late. I was at the Special Education Advisory Network, the work that's happening on the ground, so I apologize about that. When will the state take responsibility? The state has taken responsibility. That's why we're here. That's why we're doing the work we're doing. And we are going to set benchmarks. But this is not just the state. This is everybody doing this together. We're talking about decades of neglect that is going to take many years to actually get to the place that we need to be. But we're taking responsibility by being there already and already making changes that will have an impact. This is day 4, 5.
Questions from the audience? You get to drive this conversation for an hour, folks. Here we go. coming your way. Please say your name and ask your question, and if you direct it to a particular individual, all the better. Yes, sir, please stand.
Lauren Adrian. Thank you all for being with us tonight, and thank everybody for coming. So I have a question for Dr. Green. There are sacred cows in the system in the form of work rules that are part of the teacher's contract. Each of us has had a great experience in our lives with teachers, but there are still work rules in the contract that are not really designed to serve students. They're really designed to serve the interests of teachers that are not necessarily consistent with best practices or the best interests of the students involved. Your thoughts?
So I think we all know and understand that we need changes. Mary Beth and I have discussed the fact that there need to be changes. I think we're aware of that. We are looking for a contract that really impacts students. So that's what we're looking to do, not hurting or not disenfranchising, but really making it student-centered and that teachers also benefit from it. So that's what we're doing, but we really do need to have some change.
The next question is from the Providence Journal. Is that you, Linda?
For Mary Beth Calabro, kind of on the same point, does the teacher's contract need to be completely reevaluated?
So when we enter into negotiations, everything in the contract is on the table. And we will be entering into negotiations long before, for the first time in a very long time, but definitely in the history of my tenure. In case you all forgot, we didn't enter into negotiations for a long time, and the last time we negotiated a contract. So we will be entering into negotiations long before this contract even expires. So everything's on the table. Everything's up for renegotiation.
Yes, sir.
Jason Marchetti, I'm from Pawtucket, Rhode Island. I teach at Jacqueline Walsh Arts High School. My question is there a plan in the state to address the funding formula? There's a huge discrepancy on how each district is funding, per student. And my question is for the commissioner, if there's any way that we could get more resources, obviously, to the inner city schools.
So I don't know if there is going to be changes to the funding formula. However, I will tell you that local municipalities have not kept up with the funding that the state has been putting into the local communities. So that's a real issue. And I think what I've been hearing from superintendents in my time here is that the local decisions are what's driving what happens in the school. And that's not how it should be. It should be the needs of the students, the teachers, the educators that drive what happens with the formula that is generated locally. So I think that we really need to look at how we continue to fund locally and what is a priority. I'm going to say something very unpopular. And you can be angry at me if you want. Try taking a football team away. But when we need books, chairs, different courses for students, different decisions are being made. So I think we have to take a good, hard look on how we're funding locally, because we're not keeping up.
The next question is from the Providence Journal.
This one is for Mayor Diosa and Dr. Gallo. So the state intervened in Central Falls 20 years ago. Why is it still the lowest performing district in the state?
Oh, good, it's yours.
I think there's many reasons, right? And
Mayor, could you put the microphone a little bit closer? Thank you.
I think there are many reasons why it still continues to be challenged in the way that it is. I think, in essence, Central Falls is the microcosm of many urban districts across this country, and quite frankly, Providence, right? We have a high concentration of low-income families. Not many parents have attained a high school or college degree, just like in my family. It's a very transient community because as soon as a family starts to earn a good living wage, they look for other communities where they can get a better education to move to. The funding formula is a big one. I think that there needs to be a change in the funding formula to address the ELL issue and get more money into the classroom to support the teachers who are dealing with kids who just came from a different country, are just learning the language and everything that has to come with being in the United States in a classroom like we have in Central Falls. You know, one example that I give, and I got perspective a few years ago when I talked to a family who had just came from, I think, Guatemala, Central America, somewhere in Central America, and I said, hey, you know, why don't you engage more with the school district? Why don't you participate more with teacher conferences? And to them, they're saying, look, I came from a place where there was a lot of corruption. There's no electricity in our schools. I'm sending them to a school where there's computers all over the place, TVs on the wall. I'm pretty sure my kid's going to be better off than I am. And so changing that mentality too is going to take quite some time. And I think that's one of the, again, I go back to the same point, one of the main reasons why Central Falls has suffered in the last few years is, you know, we haven't been able to grow in a significant way to be able to attract home ownership, businesses to continue investing in our community. And that's why I defer to you on the technical stuff, as I consider Dr. Gallo an expert, and she was the first one to be at the school district building at 5 in the morning, and the last one to leave. So she definitely worked very hard while she was there.
So, thank you. So, I think another reason from a different perspective as to why Central Falls is still a very difficult place to move the children to great success, and I apologize to everybody here at the table. It's because that teacher contract is a disaster. We could not move the needle. And I know that I respect Mary Beth completely, but I also know that when I sit at a table with Mary Beth, negotiation means negotiation. We'll both win, we'll both lose. And the Central Falls table, that was not the case. We lost and lost and lost. We thought we were going to make it when Arnie Duncan insisted that we do a particular thing and go in a particular way. And we tried his way, and we were right on the cusp of change when, unfortunately, and I say it publicly, a commissioner at that time caved completely, totally, to the political powers at that time. And we were stuck. Anakano and I and the rest of the board simply had to live through it. Death threats, horrible threats to family, but we continued to walk the streets and hold our heads high. We were trying to change the culture of these kids can't do it. So when you couple the fact that teachers are saying this over and over again, saying it's okay, they're not expected to go so far. Yes, the families had no idea of what's available and what's open to them. So teachers are saying this, We're struggling to get the families truly involved, to build a culture that says children matter. They are our future. Teachers need to be boots militant, absolutely, but for the good, for the social, emotional welfare of the children they serve. They must never hear from a teacher, "I don't believe in you. Go back where you came from. I only get a paycheck. Whether you learn it or not, I get a paycheck." I'm a teacher. I started first-generation college goer in my family. It mattered. It mattered to my father, who couldn't read, who kept saying, "You have to go, Fran. You have to learn." And I struggled. I was a non-reader until 6th grade. So there's a lot that goes on. And that's what I meant in my opening statement. Integrity, absolute respect. Teachers must teach. Yes, math, science, of course, but they need to teach very simply habits of the mind, critical thinking, believe in yourself. This partner here had a grand experience. You can do it, she heard. Families, teachers are a family. Every classroom is a family. We must move on. We cannot continue the way we are. You're all here. I understand there were 400 seats sold out here. Sold out. And so, by all means, your 400 needs to exponentially multiply, because we cannot leave this commissioner with nobody. We cannot leave Mary Beth in the same old fashion. That's why Central Falls didn't move. I apologize. Thank you.
Dr. Gallo, I think if we reduced our prices for tonight, maybe we would fill the seats a little bit better. So we'll give that a try. I want to continue on. I've got an audience question, but because we're talking about teachers, because you were talking about what sounds like the absolute worst in some teachers in Central Falls, I wanted to ask Dr. Dingus Eason, when you're building up new teachers, when you're building that pipeline of teachers, what is going to make the difference so that no one would ever face anything like that again?
This year will mark the first cohort that are going through a redesigned teacher education program. So in 2016, we heard, and we being the Feinstein School of Education, heard a resounding message from Rhode, that we had to do better, we had to make changes, and we had to think about very carefully the types of teachers that we were graduating. And my predecessors and faculty heard that message and have been diligently engaged in redesigning our programs. So my first year will mark the beginning of this first cohort of students. We have a new course that is designed so that all of our students will have a field experience their first semester in the program of their choice. In the first semester of their freshman year, they are now out in classrooms. It makes a difference because with these placements now, we're not waiting until junior year. With these placements, they're going into Providence schools. And so what we're hearing from students that are in these classes is they're saying, "Oh, I didn't realize it was like this in Providence schools. Oh, I thought it was like this," or, "Oh, I really like the kids." Part of the process is debunking the myths around who the kids in Providence schools are, who the families in Providence schools are, the communities that these kids come from. I've gone into every single 101 class, and one of the messages that I've delivered to students in every single one of these first-year classes is that genius is not distributed, nor is it limited by zip code. Meaning that as teachers, we have to, as teacher educators, we are trying to impart this message to our students now. Our students get a diversity text that follows them across all 4 years in the program. Next year, we're going to be doing curriculum mapping to ensure that this diversity text touches across every single 4 years. And what topics are we discussing? Because our teachers have to be prepared for the context of not just Providence schools, but schools for the 21st century. They can't go back to, in many instances, teachers cannot go back to the communities from which they came from to teach. Their teachers are still teaching. So they're going into urban placements, and they have to be prepared for that. And part of doing that work is taking that mirror and looking at themselves and really starting to realize, who am I, but who am I in relationship to these kids that I need to be teaching? And so that process has to start very early. Let me frame it this way too. In a traditional sense in teacher education, one of the problems with teacher education, why I stepped away from teacher education at one point in my career, is that we silo diversity, and by virtue of siloing diversity, we were siloing conversations about race. Well, race is the elephant in the room. None of us tonight have even mentioned the 4-letter word here, race. Part of what we're talking about is about race. It's about educating Black and brown kids, and we have to get real and be able to have these discussions. Yes, they're challenging discussions, but I want our teachers to be able to engage in those discussions as well. We're trying to make sure that our teachers are ready for these technology-rich classrooms. We're trying to ensure that our teachers have some level of competency in ELL or special education. So we heard the word from Rhode. We heard the message from people that were in the field practicing as teachers and principals and superintendents, and we tried to make those changes, and we will continue to address those changes. But I just wanted to put that out there, that we're very cognizant of that, and my faculty and my staff, we've worked really diligently to try and address that. And I wouldn't be here if this was the traditional type of teacher ed program where we're just gonna, we just do diversity in that one class. I've been there, done that. We can't afford to do that anymore.
Thank you, Dean. I want to encourage the panelists, certainly don't feel like you have to be directly sort of questioned to jump in and add commentary. I do have another question from the audience.
Good evening. My name's Ayanna Bass. I'm actually a special ed, LED major in here at Rhode Island College. Thank you for everybody for being here. My peers are also here from my cohort because we believe education is important. And I was actually at Commissioner Infante Green's conversation yesterday evening as well. A lot of important conversations happening. One thing that we're concerned about as educators going into the profession are the barriers that keep us from getting there. And one of them specifically being the praxis exam. The multiple tests we have to take, not saying that they're not important, because content is critical for the work that we're going to be doing with our students. However, I spent almost $1,200 in the last 3 years to basically determine that I am capable of teaching something to a student, which I have a principal that would be willing to hire me tomorrow. So if I don't pass my praxis exam, I cannot be an effective educator in a school where students that look like me need me. But that's a benchmark set by whom, and why are we not considering these barriers for individuals who are not going into education as a result of that?
Sure, so I can address that. So we are looking at our certification requirements. You know, my first 2 weeks here, I come from a state where every teacher is required to have a master's degree. But when I found out that if you come from New York, you have to start the process over, I was shocked. So we are looking at certification and what it takes and what we need to do and how we get more teachers into the classroom. So that's a exercise that we're embarking on.
Dana, I noticed you nodding your head a lot. I wondered if you had anything to add.
Where are you?
I know.
I'm like whack-a-mole. You can see me, I just go everywhere.
I'm sorry, I lost you there for a moment. I was nodding my head because one of the things as a new person to the state of Rhode Island that I go across context and I constantly hear is, we need more teachers of color. I'm aware of that. I hear you. Yes, I know that. And that was part of why I came here as well and pursued the deanship. I kind of want to just take that apart for a minute and address that, yes, there are barriers, I think, with the SAT requirement in particular. I was looking at some SAT data, and the students of color in the state, in particular, looking specifically at Black and Latino students, tend to score at least 100 points below where their white counterparts are scoring on the SAT, and the SAT is used for admission purposes to schools of education. And so I think that is part of the problem. So I'm encouraged to hear the commissioner talk about that. We will be looking into that.
But can I say something? We're not making different qualifications for teachers of color. I just want the audience to understand that we're not doing that.
No, and I understand that, but I just want to highlight that there are those barriers there, and I think that if we are interested in increasing the numbers of teachers of color, such as a state like Connecticut has done, they've removed the SAT requirement. And actually, Connecticut as a state has done some pretty interesting things in terms of the data pieces around collecting data and actually in some ways holding districts to some level of some degree of accountability around the hiring of teachers of color, providing tools for recruitment of teachers of color as well. But I think also as a school of education, we bear a tremendous responsibility in that. But I also want people to start to think of it not necessarily as the singular pipeline, because there are multiple places where teachers of color, people of color can enter the teaching profession. And it's not necessarily just limited to the traditional means. The School of Ed here, we will be working very closely with Mount Pleasant High School. For example, I spent a lovely afternoon at Mount Pleasant today, and we'll be working very closely there with the Teacher Academy. I will also be, and if any of you know of any funders, see me afterwards. Because we need to have a whole programmatic approach. That is one of my goals in being here, a programmatic approach for teachers of color. And I think part of the conversation that needs to be had too is that I think there has been some resistance around this conversation that, okay, the ranks of teachers of color need to be increased here. I've kind of felt that there's been some resistance. But I think people need to understand from a historical perspective and from a research perspective, and most certainly I've done this research and on the qualitative side, but even on the quantitative side now, we can look and see what teachers of color are bringing to the table in terms of educational outcomes for students. And so I think it is something that we will be investing a bit of time and effort into. So I need people to understand I don't have a magic beanstalk behind the School of Education where there are just teachers of color flowing from the beanstalk or whatever. This takes time, this takes resources, this takes effort, and it has to be very purposeful.
Thank you, Dean. The next question is from the Providence Journal.
Hi, working on a story right now about the incredibly high absenteeism rates in Providence. And when you get to the high schools, we're looking at 1 out of 3 kids missing, chronically absent, missing 18 days of school, on a track to not graduating. What do you hear from your friends about why high school doesn't work for them?
I would say it's all about the climate and culture. I was actually on the road to being chronically absent last year, my freshman year.
Jay Shell, will you put the mic a little closer? Thank you.
I'm very short. Can you hear me now? But it's all about climate and culture. Like I said, I was on the road to being chronically absent my freshman year, and it was all about the experience that I was having with the staff and the teachers and the students there. It takes a community to raise a child. It takes a village, as they say, and it's also all about the support system that you have within that school. If you're not trusting your teachers and your parents aren't there to back you up and you don't have that support, you're not going to be able to succeed. And you're not going to want to go to school because you feel like every day you're like, oh, I have to walk into this hellhole and I don't want to be here and I'm not learning anything and this isn't working for me. So I think it's all about making sure that the students have a good relationship with each other, especially through restorative justice if there's an issue. The teachers are working with the students to make sure that they're getting the education that they need. Their parents are involved in their education and making sure that their parents know what's going on and making sure that they're supporting that student. And it's all about making sure that it's a one big circle that's all connected and that everyone is working together to build that sense of community.
Thank you.
I have another question in the audience. Yes, sir.
Oh, sorry. Hi, my name's Lenny Seo, and this is for the whole board. Do you feel that the lawmakers in our state, through all the tax cuts that they have given to the corporations not paying into their fair share to help support the school system, brought us to where we are today?
Who wants to take that one?
I'm going to take a stab at it.
All right, Mary Beth.
I can tell you that in Providence, because we have such a vast amount of non-taxable property, that significantly impairs the amount of money that we can utilize for schools and infrastructure in general. So that is a huge issue to me, in my estimation. I think that having renegotiated contracts with those entities that are not-for-profit but have, in-kind relationships with the city in terms of how much money they'll give in lieu of taxes definitely need to be renegotiated. I also think that there needs to be less gifts given to millionaires who are building ugly towers on the, did I say that out loud? I'm sorry. Buildings that look like I don't know what on the waterfront. Yeah, tax breaks. Those things don't make sense in our city right now. What makes sense in our city right now is to have a stabilized tax base until we can rebuild money and have rainy day funds that we don't dip into to pay bills and fill potholes. That's what makes sense. What doesn't make sense is to continue to build buildings and continue to give tax breaks to people who clearly don't need tax breaks. And we don't have enough affordable housing. We don't have enough people to live in the houses that we have currently because we don't have a minimum wage that allows people to have housing. So I think the powers that be, both in the state and the city government, need to take a long, hard, and fast look at what they're doing in terms of tax stabilization, obviously minimum wage and housing, and figure out that they're just doing it wrong.
Thank you, Mary Beth. Question from the Providence Journal.
Another one for Jay Shell. What's one thing that you think needs to change in the classroom?
Will you bring the mic closer this time so you can tell me? One thing that I would change in the classroom is definitely the connection that teachers are having with students. I feel like there is a disconnect. It may be because of age, it may be because of the generation that they grew up in, but not even just with technology, it's also about the person, like the student personally. If that connection with that student and that teacher isn't there, they're not going to want to learn. I would say that I learned the most from experiences, learning from my friends and through their experiences as well. So having that connection with the teacher and a student will allow for those experiences to transplant, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but I think you understand. One of those. But I think allowing that the teacher and the student somehow, if it's field trips, after school activities, whatever it is, doing whatever it takes to make sure that that connection is there and that they see them as like another parent or another person that they can run to and have that trust and that connection.
We have a live Twitter feed going on, and Whitman from the Providence Journal is going to ask our Twitter question.
How can parents assist in the transition in Providence?
So I think one of the things that parents can do, there's a couple of committees that have been formed. They're community design teams. There are nominations out now. The only qualification is that you should have a child within the system. So there's that place. There's also, we have a parent action committee also that is available that will be making decisions, and that has to be representative of the community, because I think we started touching a little bit about race. When I went to the first parent action committee, the PAC committee, it was all parents from a certain area of the city. So we are repurposing those committees so that they're parents that are representative of the entire city. So there are going to be multiple opportunities to get involved. We have a website for Providence, PVD for kids. If you go on there, you will see how to join. There are many, many opportunities.
Jesse, I'm wondering what sort of opportunities have you noticed as a parent in Newport? Because you seem pretty engaged. What are you seeing among your peer group and other parents?
Sure. So, there are different issues, obviously. But, in Newport right now, there are parents are being asked to help co-design and sort of show up to meetings about the buildings of the new school system, new school buildings, and that sort of thing. There's obviously a lot of involvement from parents when it comes to the budget meetings and the school district asks us to get involved in all of that. But beyond it too, I think there's actually just an opportunity to sort of open the dialogue between parents and teachers, and that's something I don't see as an effective thing going on right now at all. My younger daughter is in 4th grade. She has considerable anxiety. This year, this transition was particularly hard for her for whatever reason. So I've been working with the counselor at the school and her teacher and talking at least 2 or 3 times a week, just check-ins and here's what's going on from both directions. A funny thing happened. My daughter doesn't eat dairy. She's lactose intolerant. So they had a pizza party, and the teacher went out and got the pizzas, everything else, and she's used to not necessarily having the same snacks as the rest of the kids. It's a thing. She came home from school and she was super excited. And I said, well, what's going on, Clem? How you doing? And she said, well, they had a pizza for me. My teacher went out and got a pizza for me. I said, what? And so she ordered a pizza without cheese, and she went and got some of that weird fake cheese and put it on it. And, pizza was there. It was great. And it was this little thing. I reached out to the teacher and said, hey, first, if I can help just cover the cost of the cheese, just let me know. But more importantly, I wanted to say thank you, because what you did kind of took it from being oh, there's this new teacher and I have these feelings and oh, it's so hard, and all of a sudden there's this person who's just in her corner and behind her and ready to fight for her and be her advocate in that room. And it was it was a huge corner that we turned. And the funniest thing was that the teacher reached out and said, nobody ever says thank you. I never hear a nice thing. I always get complaints. So all the conversations we have are about what's wrong, not about what's going right. So I really do think a huge piece, if you want to talk about parents getting involved, is not just recognizing all the problems. There's plenty of problems. We always find problems. But find the things that are going right. Find those ways that the teachers do connect with students and recognize.
Dana Borelli-Murray, along those lines, you mentioned human-centered and individual learning and that sort of thing. in that realm to make sure that we have this type of very individualized paying attention to me that Jay Shell's talking about, looking at a person as a person? How are you doing that in Rhode Island, Dana?
Yeah, I was so enjoying listening to and I didn't want to jump in because I was really listening, but I want to connect the dots. We've talked a lot about the beginning of the pipeline and who gets in, who gets to be a teacher, but we haven't talked much about what happens once you're in. And if you're a star athlete, you don't stay a star athlete getting one professional development day a year, But we're doing that to our educators. You get in the classroom and you're out, you're doing your work. And so you can't lean in everywhere when you're a community organization. You find your niche, you lean in, you find your space. And we've always landed in that space around the and so what now? Like, now you're a teacher, now you're in a classroom. How do we help you do the best of your abilities today in the 21st century? So, you'll hear terms get thrown around a lot. You're right, people say blended learning or personalized learning or deeper learning. It's like tomatoes to me. I think that really what we're talking about is, can you, as a teacher, do great differentiation for your students? Can you change the pacing for your students? And can you do deep identity work, both yourself and for your students and with your students? And I think it's when you do that, that's when your work is built around what, again, we would call culturally responsive teaching, where you are truly and deeply teaching from a perspective that really centers around students and their lived experience in their lives. And so much of it, Jesse, it's from moments like that. It's moments to Yaniza saying it's when a person knows you. It's when Jay Shell says, that biggest thing is connections. That is what we see. That is the most important piece. And however we can lean in and support around that. We also think that, as I said earlier, those that are closest to the problem are often closest to the solution. And I mean that in terms of thinking about not just classroom change, but school-wide change. And when we're thinking about changing our schools, we really should be considering, like the commissioner has said, we need to engage all of the stakeholders and center them and think about local change, though. What will happen? How does your school define success for its students? And how do we help you map into that? How do we make sure that you've defined success for your students and that we're figuring out the way that your teachers are getting the right supports to do that well and that your students are able to succeed? So some areas that we think a lot about when we're thinking about training and supporting educators over time are things around classroom culture, ownership and agency, differentiation, and rigor and mastery. Rigor is so important when we're thinking about education. We've set the bar sometimes way too low and only for certain students. But really the struggle is where there's value in education. It is that struggle, it is that learning pit that you fall in and you are able to pull and move your way out of. That is the true learning that will create lifelong learners and create the citizenship we want to have in our country.
So I'm going to follow up just with the Commissioner Infante Green or Mary Beth, but perhaps both. One professional day a year, and I heard the Commissioner at a Rhode Island Commodore's breakfast, and she's not satisfied with that, but I'm just wondering, why is it that way? It seems like most of us in just about any profession would spend much more time and effort to honing our skills and getting them right. Why is this happening here?
So we used to have 6 professional development days in the contract. The city negotiated them away. We didn't negotiate them away, the city did. So we have, during the summer, Professional Development Institute, which is about 3 weeks in the summer, where teachers could take professional development over the course of those 3 weeks. We also have professional development that happens during the day, depending upon if you're engaging in a new curriculum or new product, not a curriculum, if you're engaging in a new product or if you have a new subject area that you're teaching. And
So Mary Beth, this is a money issue? Is that the reason the city wouldn't have something like that? Is this just about money? What, yep. Commissioner?
It's about money.
I don't know what was negotiated or what wasn't, but I want us to be clear. Mary Beth is talking about voluntary sessions.
No, those are mandatory sessions that were in the contract.
No, the ones you were talking about in the summer or all those other times. I'm talking about mandatory professional development. That needs to be in all that we do, in every school. We cannot have one, whether the city negotiated or not. That's not acceptable to me. And we can't have these volunteer professional development days. As great as they are, we're not leveling what we need. Everybody needs to have the same information, because who goes to those volunteer days? The best teachers, the ones that need it the least. So when we talk about all the work that we need to do, when we're talking about the changes that need to happen, we've been talking about connections. If we don't think the kids can make it, let me tell you, kids know. Kids know if you believe in them or not. We need to do that through the curriculum. I was just at a meeting, there were 2 meetings 2 hours ago, with some teachers that said, you know, we have to make sure that the kids get exposed. No, not exposed. And this is not just Providence, Rhode Island. This is not about exposure. This is about deep work, understanding what rigor is, and having everybody on the same page. This can't be one teacher in one room and another teacher in another room. This is about consistency, setting the expectation for all kids, regardless of where they live, what language they speak coming in, or what race they are, or what socioeconomic background they come from. That is extremely important. And we can't do one work without doing the other one at the same time. Because you can have a curriculum in front of you, but if your expectations are different for the kids sitting in front of you, that matters. And we need to do that work. And we can't do it on a volunteer basis.
So, panelists, I'm going to allow another question from the Providence Journal, and then I'll come down pretty quickly and get a 1-minute closing statements. You know, what do you want to leave? I'm giving you time to think about that. What do you want to leave this audience thinking or doing differently as a result of having attended? And don't jump up from your seats, because I got one eye clicker question left for you, those of you with eye clickers. But for now, a question by the Providence Journal.
So this is for anyone on the panel. Someone mentioned earlier that there are school districts in Texas the size of Rhode Island. Do we need to really rethink having 36 school districts, 36 superintendents, and 36 budgets?
I'm going to take that one. When you have districts that are struggling to buy books, I don't think I need to answer that for anyone. But when you have districts that have one school in one part of town and another school in another part of town, and they're different, we have a problem. When we have schools, we just heard, do we need to change the funding formula? Do we need to do this? Do we need to do that? We have to rethink this. I keep saying this. If we were a district in Massachusetts, all of Rhode Island, we'd be in the lowest 10%. I know we want to keep our identities, but this is not the place where we should be having that struggle. But a place like Newport, they're having a conversation about coming together. Let me tell you, it's not pretty. But until we can have those hard conversations and why we don't want to join together, we're never going to move forward. That's my answer.
Any other comments related to that before we go into this sort of 1-minute speed round, we'll call it? I'm just teasing. All right. So I'd like to start, I think, over here with Jesse Von Doom, not a wrestler, but a great parent of two daughters in Newport. And just what is it that these folks should leave thinking? Better yet, what is it that these folks should start doing differently?
I mean, for me, the big takeaway, the thing from tonight and from forever, I've been a parent now for 13 years. Paying taxes before those 13 years, it was always the easiest thing in the world to say yes to giving more money for education, for more resources, for more time. And I think that's something that's important for all of us. I just really reiterate that idea that the students that are in our schools right now will be the leaders in our state or in some other state later, and I'd rather have them here. So let's do a great job here, giving them something, a system they can build on, so that our future leaders, our doctors, our lawyers, and our artists and everyone else have some solid footing to move forward on, and that starts with education for all of us to support. That's just so vital. And so, from those of us in other districts looking to Providence and what's going on here now, I hope that this goes from the thing where the state took over because it had to, but really sets a shining example that the rest of us can all see to sort of make it better for all of us, because we all need that improvement. So, just thank you.
I'm gonna give Jay Shell the last word, so we're gonna skip you and go down the line here. Eliza Gallant.
My hope today, leaving here tonight for all of you as far as a mindset goes, is, Fran, thank you so much for bringing up the example of someone stating these kids can't do it, is I'd like to inspire and empower everybody here to change the narrative of how we view education. What I will tell you is that data is given to you in a way that makes you perceive it however it is that you experience schooling, or however it is that your own biases come to play. My hope for everybody here and on this panel is to define this question: what do we consider to be successful? How do we measure success? If you were to have measured success the way we are currently measuring it in the state of Rhode Island right now, I would not be a student that you want in your classroom. I would be a student that would be bringing your SLO down. I would be a student that would probably not make you look good. I would be a student that could not get into Rhode Island College. I would be that student. I was fortunate enough to have grit and persistence. So my question to all of us is, how do we measure success? And I have a person next to me right now that defines that, okay? This individual, by the way, she has her own lipstick. I told her I would mention this. She has her own lipstick company that she designed, okay? It's called Crime Cosmetics, and she's also a music agent.
Yep,
And
for
what
5 people.
For 5 people. And here's what I'm going to leave with you. Use square root and cube root symbols to represent solutions to equations of the form times 2 equal p and x3p, where p is positive rational number. Evaluate square roots of small perfect squares and cube roots of small perfect cubes, and then know the value of square 2 that is irrational. That is how we're getting our numbers back for students' proficiency. And what I will tell you is this hustler right here is going to be leading many of us, because it is relevant, she cares, she has leadership, and she has adults around her that are going to tell her that regardless of what label a number says, she is unstoppable. And I hope that we all know that.
Superintendent Gallo.
I'll just leave you with a very simple question. Isn't it time that every able-bodied person in Rhode Island stepped up to be the guardian of our most vulnerable?
Mayor Diosa.
I can't tell you how inspired and how hopeful I am with this new commissioner, and I think that all of us in some way have noticed her boldness, her fearlessness to address the tough questions, And I think as all Rhode Islanders, we should get right behind her and support her as best as we can.
Thank you.
Mary Beth.
So first, I'm going to say that that young lady right there, I want her in those seats. I want her to be a leader because she impressed me in 5 minutes, not even 5 minutes when I met her. In terms of Uniza, Providence never should have let her go. That was one of Providence's biggest mistakes. And every chance I get, I beg her to come back.
Dana.
Still not answering me.
Oh, sorry.
But, you know, read what you want to read in the paper, think what you want to think. 97% of my teachers care about kids. And our kids are more than a test score. We have phenomenal kids. We have resilient kids. We have amazing kids. We have talented kids. Come by. Stop by a classroom. Volunteer. We'll welcome you. We want you to see what we do. We challenge you to see what we do.
Dana Barrow-Murray.
So when the business community was polled about what they thought was the most important stuff they wanted to see in their new employees, their answer was communication, followed by critical thinking, collaboration, creativity. These are not the skills that a test-centric society studies or measures. So if we're going to be able to meet the needs of our changing workforce, we need to change the way we measure what we actually care about as a society. I'm also going to end by saying that I really try to live every day remembering that the system that we're talking about right now is not at all broken. It is doing exactly what it was set up to do, which is to systemically oppress and protect people that have power and privilege. So I'm very excited for our new commissioner, and I'm excited for us to redesign this system with students at the center. So thank you.
Dr. Dingus Eason.
My message is quite simple: inspire an educator. So that means for those of you that are teachers, renew your purpose. I know that you've taken a beating in the press here recently, and I know that there are some of you that have questioned your role. Renew your purpose. Go back to your mission of why you entered the classroom. Reconnect with those students, reestablish relationships with parents, figure out new ways to do what you need to do in order to ensure that our kids are achieving and ensure that we are moving the needle. Inspire an educator. Inspire somebody to become an educator. I question how many people in households are telling their kids, become a teacher. It's a noble career. It's a noble career path. You can be a lifelong learner. And most certainly, my final piece is inspire a teacher of color. We need more teachers of color in the profession.
Commissioner Infante Green.
Well, it's going to be more than a minute. So, what I want everyone to walk away with and really think hard is that we need to begin to see the students. Really see the students. Every conversation that I have with kids, every single one is exactly what she said. The connection or lack thereof. And that lack thereof, when someone says to a child, because I've had kids say this to me, you should drop out of school. You're not going to amount to something. We as adults have power. I believe that teachers start in this profession because they care. But when we don't see the kids and we have an adult-driven agenda, we have lost our way. And no matter what we say, let's see how it plays out. It has to be about the kids. Only time will tell. Only time will tell. We can say we care about the kids, and many, many, many people do. But I'm not just saying that about educators, I'm saying about it, everybody in this room. Where will you be when these conversations get tough? Where will you be when real change needs to happen? We are here today because no one stood up. And I hope that as you came here today, you're going to stand up for the kids and no one else.
Jay Shell, I promise you the last word, but before you do that, tell them what the lipstick company's about, because we're trying to make some money here.
Okay.
We're going to see if we can get this in the Providence Journal. I don't know. I'm looking at you, Alan. I'm looking at you.
So, Prime Cosmetics is a vegan and cruelty-free cosmetics company, cosmetics line. I started making lip gloss because I was born with a cleft lip, and a lot of chapsticks and other products were not working for me, so I decided to start to create my own, and then I decided, why not sell them, make some money, so, yeah.
What's that thing we need to go home thinking about? What's that thing we need to do differently, Jay Shellshank?
So, I've been applauded a lot, and I just want to say that there are other students like me. I'm not the only one. I may have higher test scores, score in the 96th percentile and the 78th percentile, but there are students who are achieving the same things that I am, have the same potential that I do. It's just you don't see them the same because they don't have the same test scores as me. I went to Henry Barnard, and I see some of my elementary school teachers in the audience. I went to community prep for middle school where my teachers were incredibly supportive. I currently go to the Met where the director is in the audience right now. I have a support system. I have people who care about me, and not every student will have that. That is a luxury now when it should be something that should just be expected. I have to work for that. I had to work for that. My mom had to go and work incredible amount of hours to get me where I am. I'm gonna cry. Oh my God. She pushes really hard for me, and not every student has that. Not every student has a parent who cares about them like I do. So that teacher, that educator, that person has to be there when their parent is not able to. Thank you.
All right, folks, we've got one more iClicker question. You didn't lose it yet, did you? Look for your iClicker. We'll give you some time here. All right.
Can I just say something?
Oh, Commissioner, of course.
So I just got a text. When we're talking about engaging the community at large, we're only doing it in English. Can't happen again, guys.
All right, you saw this question before. What are your expectations for the state takeover of the Providence Public Schools? A, it will produce lasting improvement. B, it will produce temporary improvement. C, it won't change things. D, it can't hurt, might as well try. E, it will make things worse. Do we lose that many clickers? Come on. Where are you at? All right, we're going to close it. Hey. All right, so look for the stories tomorrow in the Providence Journal. Paul Parker will be looking at this data. I want to thank all of you for coming. Please, a big round of applause for all of our panelists. Drive safely, and we'll see you at the next Public Occurrences soon.